Okay, my name is Cooke from a company called Onshape. Could I just have a quick show of hands? Everybody heard of Onshape? Yes, about half. Anybody used Onshape? Are those? All right. For anybody who's not in the know, then Onshape in its basic form is CAD in the cloud. It's entirely hardware agnostic. It's all run in the cloud. But what I'm going to talk about today is really the data management component, not only of Onshape, but of really how we have believed to have fixed the age-old problem of PDM systems. And this is entitled, How Cloud-Based Data Management Prevents Design Gridlock. So the question is, what is design gridlock? So before we do that, I just want to revisit old file-based CAD and PDM. Now, typically, if you've got a CAD system, then you create your design and it stores that data in a file. Now, the issue is that it's not just one file, but it's hundreds of files, it's thousands of files. So suddenly, with a project of a medium complexity, you're suddenly trying to manage this data with Windows Explorer, which is virtually impossible. So really, unless you invest in servers and PDM software, then you're going to get into trouble very quickly trying to manage and version control files on a disk. So if you do go ahead and install a PDM system, then you go ahead and check that data in, and the database behind that basically indexes the data, stores information about where that file is, metadata, any other data you want to store with it, and that's all stored in that database. Now, there are still copies of those files on the user's computer, so you've then got issues with copies of files everywhere, who's working on the latest revision and so on. Now, engineers, I would say, are very methodical about how we do things. So if you're going to make sure you're working on the latest version, you're going to talk to the PDM system, which is what happens here. So when the CAD system then talks to the PDM system, the files are checked out and then locked. Okay, and this is one of the aspects of design gridlock. Once those files are locked, then nobody else can actually work on them. It could be an individual file, it could be the assembly, but the fact remains that if you've got a team of engineers, the PDM files are locked, nobody else can work on them until they are checked in, which leads to a serial design workflow, which is not really, which basically creates design gridlock. A lot of these time compression diagrams you see from CAD vendors don't make any sense if you're locking files and people have to work in a serial fashion. Now, this does lead to some maverick designers working outside PDM and managing their data on their Windows Explorer area and then check it in when they're finished. But again, that can cause a lot of problems with things going out of date and people modifying files all over the place. Okay, and it doesn't matter whether your PDM system is located on a server in a room down the hall or whether it's hosted in the cloud. The fact remains that if you're storing your data in files, then you're going to create this thing that we call design gridlock. And that is not just PDM. That's just one of the aspects, but it's also things like, is your hardware up to date? Is everyone working on the same piece of software? Installing and downloading software. These are all things that Onshape solves by putting everything in the cloud. Okay, so how do we get over this problem of design gridlock? Well, the thing is just to get rid of files. So how do you get rid of files? Well, in old PDM systems, then they're all based on relational databases. They use SQL. They've got fixed schemas. They store information, metadata about files in a rigid format, which is very difficult to change in production. Now, modern databases are non-relational. They are very performant and distributed. They keep things in a completely flexible schema that can change on the fly in real time. So when Onshape was just an idea, we looked at these modern technologies and worked out whether the best way that we can overcome the issues with PDM. And when people think about Onshape, they often think about as CAD in the cloud, but in reality, what it is, it's a data management system with CAD bolted on. Okay, so when somebody actually logs into Onshape, they are presented first with their data. Okay, so this is Contrary to what normal CAD and PDM does, where you go in the CAD and then you talk to the PDM system, it's quite the opposite way around. So you start off with your data. So this can be data you've created, data that's been shared with you, data which belongs to the company. So you can access all the information that you have permission to see. And once you actually click on one of those documents, it then opens the 3D CAD in Onshape. So it's almost like the CAD is a secondary consideration here, and this is how we thought about building the architecture behind Onshape. Sort out the data management first, and then sort out the 3D CAD later. Now, because with this database is real-time and there are no files, everything is stored in the database, and what this means is that you can get more than one person working in the same document at the same time, making changes at the same time. And it's not just limited to 2 people. You could have the entire team working in the same document, working on the same part, the same assembly, even the same sketch, which sounds a bit scary, but it's not really. But I'm not suggesting anyone would particularly do that, but you can if you wanted to, because you are not locking files, you are not stopping anybody from working on your data. You can get everybody working together. Okay, and the fact that it is all hosted in the cloud just really adds to the convenience. Like I say, it's hardware agnostic. You can run it on a Mac, PC, Linux, Chromebook, mobile, tablet. All this information it's very transparent the way the data management works. It keeps out of the way of the design engineer and lets them get on the work of designing. So we're announcing today well, it's a marketing buzzword for Design Data Management 2.0, but this is really revisiting some of the things that have been in Onshape since day one that a lot of Onshape users take for granted, but in reality, these replace a lot of the issues that you get with PDM. Common things like searching, managing bills of materials, and formal release management with workflows. Those last 2 there, we were just announcing today. You just missed John Herstick on the main stage announcing those, but those are now in the product, or they will be very soon. So, not to go over what he did, because you could always watch the replay. I've got to just take a look briefly at 3 things within Onshape, which, if anybody's used 3D CAD with files with PDM, it should really blow your socks off, because looking at versions and what we call branching and also sharing. Now, if anybody's used I'll start with sharing first. And if anybody's used Google Docs, where multiple people are editing the same document or the same slide or the same spreadsheet, you can see the changes live. Okay, this is the same thing happens with Onshape. If you wanted to share a document with somebody, you simply just hit the share button, type in an email address, and then give them permission to be able to view it, add comments, edit it, and then once you hit the share button, that person will then get an email notification letting you know that they can access the document. Now, both people can open that document and work on it at the same time. Now, people love to do assemblies in Onshape because you can get the whole team working together to assemble a product really fast. And you can see the 2 people working in there. Okay, and the owner of the document has full control over who has access to the information. So once a design task is complete, you can simply go back into the share dialog and revoke their access. Perhaps change it back to view only, or, like we see here, just click the X next to it and their access is gone. Because there's been no files emailed around, then you've got full control of your intellectual property. Again, just like Google Docs, you can specify who can do what and when to your document. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, suddenly you've got the whole team changing your parts. How do you manage that process? If people are changing it willy-nilly, then really what happens? And in Onshape, because all the data is in the cloud, every action taken by every user is recorded. It basically creates a version, like Google Docs, like many other cloud systems. So if you click on a timestamp, you can see exactly how that assembly looked at that particular time. You can also track who did what to the design at that point. And when you get to a certain milestone, you can then create a version. Okay, now a version is really just a bookmark to bookmark your progress. But what it can also do is to create a branch. Now, from a version, a branch allows multiple people to work in their own separate workspaces and make changes. Now, this might be a change that is going to be an ECO, for example. So you've released a product, you want to do some ECO changes, you can do those. But when the design changes are made differently, this is one way to prevent people stepping on each other's toes. When you've finished, you can do a simple comparison between multiple branches, multiple versions, and then see both visually and at the feature level what the changes are. Okay, and then from there, if you are happy with those changes, you can merge them back together. So that's just a simple example of three areas of the core data management capabilities of Onshape. You're not having to worry about the PDM as the designer. You can quite literally just get on with what you're supposed to be doing, which is designing, not managing your CAD data. It gets completely out of the way and lets people work. So in summary, Onshape's Design Data Management 2.0 philosophy is really a modern data management tool set for modern teams, distributed teams, teams working on any type of hardware from any location in the world. Everybody working in one secure cloud workspace, and there are no copies of files going anywhere. So, of course, once you email a file, it goes out in the wild, you don't know where it is. Everything is secure within the workspace. Parallel, not serial. We mentioned if there's no file locking, so everybody can work at the same time and not wait for somebody to finish before they can work, at which point, the moment of inspiration is gone. And with the sharing, this instant collaboration. Now, you don't have to have, to share with a customer. You can just say this is view only. They don't need software because it's all in the cloud. They just click a link from the email, opens the browser, and they can view what you've asked them to see. So again, very simple to do and full control over your IP. And we saw there simple version control. We do have full workflow release management, again, which was announced today. If you wish to see that in more detail, please come over to the stand, which is at the back of the hall there. So the very first thing we decided when we were doing Onshape is, 3D CAD's been done, really. The big issue is how do people interact with data? How's it stored? How's it distributed? And then once you actually get over that hurdle, you can then add the CAD capabilities onto there. And we've also, rather than just copy what's there, is change, really step back and take a look at what the real issues are, spoke to customers, worked out what they're struggling with, and then came up with a solution that would address it. And these are some really fundamental changes that we've done. And again, our focus is to let the engineer get on with their work and get data management out of the way. And I've got a sore throat. All right. So with that, I went through at fast speed, so I wouldn't overrun. Perfect. Any questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
What happens when we do a real design in a sizable project where not just one CAD product or one anything is used, which I think is a more realistic view than everybody uses CATIA, for example,
right,
which is some people's viewpoint. Whereas much more, I think, in the real world, a mix and match for one reason or another. It's like company A buys company B and then says you have to change the CAD system in company B, which is a dumb idea because it's a lot of retraining involved. So how do you manage the data in that case where some of the work is done in Onshape and some of it is done in, of all things, CATIA?
Okay. So it depends whether you well, two things really. It depends whether you're trying to amalgamate the 3D models together to make one product. But also, okay, right. Yeah, we're not going to do an airplane. But you can add to, because we have these things called documents, and in a document, you can have all your parts assemblies, drawings, PDFs, videos, images, CAD files, anything else. Now, we read native SolidWorks, CATIA, NX, Solid Edge, and a couple of others, and read their native data. So when you upload a file, so you basically, you do your stuff work, so your work in CATIA and upload it to your project document, that information would automatically be converted, but it also be stored in the document and version controlled there.
I didn't intend to give you a softball question.
Yes.
When you track each revision, so that's basically like an undo, if you have milestones where you want to compare one design to the other design and see the fundamental changes where you go, this is the first thing we had, this is the second one.
Yes.
So that's sort of what the old sort of revision system you're talking about was at times used for. How do you do that? Is that possible within?
Sorry, I missed a bit of the question, sorry.
Is that, well, if you've got milestones of when a design has particularly changed, so that tracks every single change you've done. So it's a bit like an undo button, but you want to, let's say, compare the cost of one design and compare the cost of another design, the performance, whatever. Do you track the milestone within the actual data management process itself, or to get that one-to-one comparison of the two design options?
So to be able to say which ones are the important ones, that is tracked in there as a version, or if you do the release management, you can then go through an approval workflow to actually get to things. But if you're doing a comparison between those, it'd just be a matter of you knowing which ones they are, because you can create as many versions or releases within one document, from its initial inception through to manufacture. Does that answer the question? Yes.
How do you handle conflict management?
So with it depends really what the conflict is. So if you
say you have a part where two different designers try to edit exactly the same thing in a slightly different way,
right,
who wins?
So if it is possible for two people to edit the same feature or the same sketch, and that is the only situation where the last person to exit that feature wins. That's the only situation. But the chances are, most people use the collaboration stuff for assembly. Few people use it for part, and 0 people use it for sketch. So that's the reality of it.
If you want to share something with an external supplier,
Yes.
can you export the assembly out of the database and then re-import it when it's been modified?
So when you export it, it will come out as a dumb solid. And then if you imported it, it'd just be a dumb solid. So it would actually be a neutral file format. So because it's a database, there are no files, so there's no like native Onshape file or anything like that.
Does Onshape provides an API for external providers to deliver services, additional services?
Yes. So we have. It's died. Okay, we have. Not much luck with this. Yeah, so we have an app store, which, because we focus on the CAD and the PDM, well, we have an app store which for people who provide simulation, rendering, and CAM, and so on. But anybody who writes external applications can use our API for free. You just need to create an account. You can build your own application, and it can either sit as a connected cloud app, or it can sit as an iframe within Onshape. Yes.
On the back of the conflict management question, if you wanted to be able to lock something and not allow anyone to change it while you're changing it, can you do that?
So, well, the simple answer to that is no, because we want to avoid locking data. You can, though, if you're modifying something, the best thing to do is to use the branching system. And then there's ways you can override. If somebody's making changes to your model which they shouldn't be doing, you can easily override what they've done. But you can also then compare what they've done and merge changes between.
So, like 4 guys are trying to modify at the same time, then the other 3 aren't supposed to be. So I can go in there and make mine the latest version over that, or pick that one.
Yes, you can. So that history of all the changes, you can promote one to the top, for example. Or even better, you could just go to the share dialog and kick them out of the document. Yes. Any more questions? Perfect, thank you. Oh, sorry, more.
Yes, before they kick you out. Yes. Who decides who kicks who out?
Well, there's the owner of the document, which if it's set up as a company, then it's usually the company is the owner. But the original creator usually has the first say, but the company administrator can override that. All right. Thank you very much.